We have to start with one basic and fundamental question. Is this normal behavior? In the mid-1950s, Elvis Presley's concerts became spectacles of unprecedented emotional fervor among female fans. Young women, often teenagers, would scream uncontrollably, cry hysterically, and even faint during his performances. Fast forward to today, and not much has changed. From Lady Gaga to Taylor Swift and Brad Pitt, young women still burst out into tears and excited screaming. It's almost like they are utterly incapable or completely unwilling to take control of their own emotional whims. In any case, this becomes a terrifying thought when we are forced to think about giving people like this any control or power within our society. But that is exactly what we have done. Now, here we are. In Canada, specifically, women have tilted the scale within many of our institutions, like the court system. They now populate positions of power in greater numbers than ever in our history. Coincidentally, we are freeing more criminals, lightening prison sentences for creeps and crooks, and degrading into a society that treats the most evil people with seemingly infinite amounts of sympathy. What we have been witnessing is the absolute feminization of our culture and our social order. Proponents argue that wokeness is not a novel ideology rooted in Marxism or post-Obama politics, but rather an epiphenomenon of demographic feminization. The increasing presence of women in institutions traditionally dominated by men. As women enter fields like academia, media, and law in greater numbers, they tend to impose feminine group dynamics, such as indirect communication, gossip, irrational empathy, and aversion to direct conflict, leading to phenomena like cancel culture. Statistics show that women are drifting further to the left on political issues, while men drift further right. Polls prove that women are more likely to prioritize inclusivity over free speech, while men continue to support stricter justice and near limitless free speech. In a recent study by the University College in London, it was found that women were less likely to support punishing cheaters playing a game with electric shocks. While both men and women showed empathy-related brain activation when a fair player was shocked. A striking gender difference emerged for the cheaters. Women's brains continue to register empathy for the cheater's pain. Men, on the other hand, responded strongly to revenge and justice by punishing the cheaters. When we apply this scientific perspective to what we are seeing in our society today, it all makes more sense. We are seeing a tilt toward blind and irrational empathy, away from logic and more rational points of view. We are seeing decades of biological science being thrown out the window to cater to the feelings of people who think they were born into the wrong bodies. We are seeing crazed criminals and thugs being released and re-released into society. Drug rates and overdose deaths are soaring because have chosen to favour more empathetic approaches. None of this is mere coincidence. In both Canada and the United States, more than half of journalism and academia positions are now occupied by women. This is an historic first. It is the first time in our history in which the leading cultural and educational institutions are controlled mostly by women. In politics, more women have been elected to public office in the past 20 years than at any other point in our history. When it comes to elections, women now outvote men by a slim enough margin to decide outcomes. One of the darkest and possibly least expected outcomes of all of this is the growing misogyny among young men, namely among Gen Z. Popular social influencers like Sneeko, Nick Fuentes, and Clavicula have become living embodiments of pure misogyny. They make Andrew Tate look like a saint. With millions of ardent followers, they are shaping the minds of our next generation of men. Whether we like it or not, this is one of the consequences of a social order that has allowed radical feminism to take hold. Sadly, It is almost like an entire generation has been raised without the strict and often frightening masculinity that has kept previous generations respectful and orderly. An entire generation raised by femininity has grown up fatherless, without a masculine role model to keep them in check. Imagine that. The next most important question is, how do we fix this? Should we expect women to be more like men, or should we accept them for who they are? Feminism is what has convinced women to be more like men, when it's convenient at least. So perhaps we can agree and conclude that feminism is the poison streaming through our society's veins. The answer may not be to disregard, disrespect, or put women back into the kitchen, but to convince them to be who they are and were always supposed to be. Any married man knows that telling a woman who she needs to be will achieve the opposite. Women, perhaps, must come to believe that they are supposed to be our society's compassionate healers, not our society's rulers. None of this means that women should not have or can never have any influence. Throughout much of history, every man has had a strong and mindful woman beside him. Women have always been our civilization's balancing powers. When men returned from war or work, broken and injured, it was the women who had the job of putting them back together. As this balance has deteriorated, so has our social fabric. Again, none of this is coincidental. Women are and always have been a powerful force for good and healing. Feminism has made them hate that role. As men, we can choose to hate and be angry, or we can choose to be gentle and understanding. We know which approach women will respond most kindly to. We can accept women for who they are, while setting firm boundaries.
Listen, babe, stop being retarded.
If women choose to continue down their current paths, they will end up with less forgiving, more cold-hearted men like Andrew Tate and Nick Fuentes. Worse yet, they will end up alone and childless. As studies show, by 2035, nearly half of women will be single and without children. To many of them, that may be fine, but for many others, it will bring about regret that is too late to act upon. For Western civilization, it will be catastrophic. As birth trends show, we now rely on mass immigration to keep ourselves at mere replacement levels. All of this points to the obvious. As a civilization, we are in trouble. Whether we want to admit it or not, we are on the cusp of absolute collapse unless we start changing who we are right now. Because women have discarded their roles as mothers, wives, and healers, we, as a society, no longer control our own destiny. Our future now relies on other cultures and other people with different views and customs. We are breeding a generation of disillusioned men and women, both of which will suffer the consequences of their own actions.